Hello, I'm Cam, welcome back to the second channel geography video. This is another series where I talk about geography and the world and stuff. And today I'm going to be bringing back this series, partly because people have been asking for it, and partly because I figured it'd be kind of fun to do a reverse spin on a video I did a while ago about parts of countries that are basically their whole own independent country. I wanted to do the reverse today and talk about places that people think are their whole own independent countries, but are actually part of another country. And yeah, we're doing that today because I figured it'd be a good opportunity to promote something that people have been asking me for so long. When people see that I travel so much for so cheaply, they're like, how do you do that? And I figured, I'd share the knowledge bit by bit as people ask, but I'd also put it all in one place. That one place is now a 50+ page book that you'll be able to buy on Amazon. I'll leave links down below in case you don't want to wait till later, but we will be talking about that. It is finally done and I'm super excited. But let's first start talking about something else I'm super excited for, because you know what I love talking about? The division and partition of Ireland. As a British person, people on the internet definitely don't get mad about me about this, but I do want to talk about Northern Ireland because it is often referred to as a country, and we could go over all day about like, oh yeah, well I mean like it's not really a country, because country is something you use to refer to sovereign states. But even if we ignore the fact that like, oh yeah, usually country and sovereign state are kind of used the same, even on the level of like, oh a country can be anything. Like if it's historically been a country and it calls itself a country, it's a country. For instance, Scotland, it's not an independent country, but it is it's a country that very few people disagree with that. In the same way, Northern Ireland should be a country, right? And we should just get along and say it's that. But even on this second definition, this kind of lower tier, Northern Ireland is not usually considered a country. And rather than me saying this and being like, trust me, some experts at the UN I phoned up last week told me, instead, let me show you ISO 3166-2GB. This is an exciting read, trust me. But no, the ISO is the International Standards Organization. Pretty much anything that needs to be, again, properly segmented and standardized is done by this company. They're not political, they just exist to allow businesses to do things in the correct way. And yeah, they basically define how the UK works and how it should be referred to. And the UK is made up of 3 nations and 3 countries and 1 province. 3 separate countries, England, Scotland and Wales, and 1 province, Northern Ireland. And yeah, if you read down here, you can also see how the way you would describe the UK is either the United Kingdom is how you describe the 4 countries together, England, Northern Ireland, Scotland and Wales. See, I just said 4 countries, the 4 places together. Great Britain is England, Scotland and Wales, and England and Wales is England and Wales. Those are the 3 terms, and they're often confused and conflated, especially these last 2, because the country code for the whole of the UK is GB, or Great Britain, which usually doesn't include that. And in a lot of schools, they teach you that like, oh yeah, there's 4 countries, because imagine going in school and being like, so what's the UK all about? Well, you see, there's 3 countries and a province. What's a province? Well, I mean, technically a province is still kind of inflammatory, and in 20 years, who knows what it'll be, so should we even teach you? And yeah, you can imagine that's a whole thing. But yeah, Northern Ireland, to explain the history and go into it is to just incite like, oh yeah, well the political things. To talk about the future is just to get really political, and I don't really want to do that too much in today's video, so let's talk about everything else to do with Northern Ireland, because we've spoken about how it was divided and why it was divided and all the different things in the past. Let's instead talk about the nice things you can find there. So, here's Northern Ireland. Look how nice Loch Ness is, I think that's how you say it. Look how nice the Hare's Gap is in the Mound Mountains. Look how nice the Giant's Causeway is. I saw this in a real picture in real life once, not just on the internet, so I know it's real good. Look, a giant sat there or something. Look how nice these Marble Arch caves are. Like, wow, Northern Ireland sure is beautiful, whether it's independent, a country, a province, a region, or whatever. And wow, the Musselden Temple and the Goliath Crane. Okay, well that's a thing. And also the NIR C3K rail car. This is one of the true beauties of Northern Ireland, man. When I think about where I want to go on holiday, I think about the NIR C3K rail car. I think we've gone past the part we wanted to. But yeah, these are all from Wikipedia. You probably can tell that from the rest of the page. But yeah, now you know, Northern Ireland's beautiful, but it's not a country. It's not even a country by like the lower level meaning of that term. It's a region, or it's a place, or it's a province, and even like the BBC official guidelines basically say just like back off and don't use words either way, because there's no official standard, there's no easy way to refer to it, so you just say it's a place that exists and is legally inside the United Kingdom. You go any further than that, and you incite some some words. So with that said, let's talk about next somewhere that I'm going fairly soon. Again, relates to the whole travel guide thing, because I want to go to Macau. And going to Macau is actually sometimes really, really expensive. It has a weird, like, it's either absurdly expensive to get there, or there's some trickery where you can make it cheaper. Talk about it later, but I'm going to Macau because I used some of that weird trickery, and yeah, because Macau is a place that you might not have heard of, and when you do hear that, like, oh yeah, it's Vegas, but Asia's Vegas or China's Vegas, you're going to be like, huh, well, I mean, I'm looking at the map right here, and I do see that it's very much labeled like a country. Wow, I didn't know Macau existed. Because, again, everyone knows Hong Kong. A lot of you might know about the weird story with that. Macau is basically the same story, but a much, much smaller place. I mean, like, look at the size of Macau right here. It's like this island and this place right here. It's a very small area that belongs to Macau, and of that small area, 66%, I think it's even higher, but a absurd percentage, more than half, was reclaimed land. So it's not even really this big, you know, all of the airport, reclaimed land. Everything they had to do here, reclaimed. There's also a bridge that goes to Hong Kong, but that's a whole other thing. So yeah, basically everyone knows that Hong Kong has a weird status, but when you hear about Macau, you see that, oh yeah, so gambling's illegal in China. It's not illegal in Macau. You cross a passport border, a customs border, and, you know, the legal system's different, the currency is different, and all of the other things are different there, like plug socket even. It's like, okay, so, wait a minute. So this is definitely a part of China, though? Yeah, so this is a place that when you hear about, you hear it's bigger than Vegas. Not just bigger than Vegas, the amount of business done here, it's 7 times bigger. You think Vegas is a big deal? Vegas is like a tiny portion of what Macau does, and to show you, like, oh yeah, is this really like Vegas, though? Like, surely that's some weird Chinese accounting, which, you know, bad comment, by the way, but if you look around here, you can see how, like, oh yeah, looks like the Strip, right? It is Chinese Vegas. It's something I'm super excited for. You should go to Macau sometime. But yeah, interesting thing about this is it is technically a part of China. It just has all those things. Falls under the same thing as Hong Kong. We've spoken about it a billion times, so I don't want to dive too deep into it right now, but I do want to mention, just because it's interesting, and it's one of the ways I'm getting in here, you can actually, you don't have to fly into Macau itself. You can fly into Hong Kong, and then from Hong Kong Airport, or Chek Lap Kok Airport, if you will, you can actually fly from there without ever entering Hong Kong. You can just cross straight over into Macau, because there's a ferry which leaves on the air side. So before you've entered Hong Kong, you can catch a ferry straight from their airport into Macau. So Macau's one of their biggest entry points is there, and that's kind of wacky, right? So yeah, fun fact of Toy Cat, Macau, it's a gambling capital, and also, here's a crazy thing, they make so much money gambling, because again, 7 times the revenue of Vegas with a much lower population, that you know what they do? They just give some money out. So the wealth partaking scheme, again, I'm gonna show you a few Wikipedia pages, just so it's like irrefutably out there, right? Like, oh yeah, this isn't me saying a thing, like, I'm not trying to take sides on what's a country and what's not, it's a real thing. And in the same way, they really do they just give you some money if you want it. Like, oh yeah, if you live in Macau, you get money because, and it's to mitigate inflation. I think this is a cool idea. Like, it's, they do it in Alaska too if you give up oil rights, but like, just give some money to people. You know, it's a really, like, you know, everyone, the cool thing about this is most people on board is like, oh yeah, just replace, you know, like, needs-based welfare with give everyone money, and now everyone feels good about it, right? Like, it's just, it's how these things should be done. Or maybe I'm crazy, but if I am crazy, you know what definitely is also crazy with me? Greenland, because Greenland, on every map of the world, you know, for every time this comes up, you're like, oh man, Greenland's so big, or Greenland, the land of the green things, it's so big, right? But there's a lot of really weird asterisks to that. So first of all, it's the biggest island on Earth, but despite being the biggest island on Earth, it's not independent. By the way, that's assuming you count Australia as a continent, but let's not talk about that. So yeah, given that Greenland is a big island, why is it not independent? It has one of those bold names on Google Maps, and yeah, it has this issue that a lot of places have, where Google, you know, Maps, whether it's Google Maps or otherwise, have an inconsistent naming scheme, because if you don't label this giant rock, because when you use the Mercator projection, like Google Maps does, Google Earth, of course, does not, this is how big it actually is, and, oh, this is also still the, we have to go to the globe view, my bad. So, if we use this very clearly fake globe view, because we know the Earth is flat, it's a well-known thing, right? But yeah, if you look at the... That's a joke. Gotta clarify, so someone doesn't get mad in the comments. So, Greenland, as you can see, it's big, but it's not as big as it seems otherwise. So, yeah, looking on this map, you can see, same thing, like, oh yeah, so it's a country, right? but it's not. It's actually a part of Denmark, but there's no easy way. Again, I've seen cartographers try, unless you're coloring in the countries, which then removes some of the point of a map, you can't really show Denmark's link to Greenland. So, also, Greenland is kind of, it has its own, set of everything. It's trying to be independent. It wants to be independent, has an independent nation movement within them. They've got their own parliament. They've got their own people. They have their own business mostly, which is fishing. They've got their own capital city even, which is Nuuk. Fun place I'd like to go to someday. Very tricky to get to, especially cheaply. Bring it back into the thing I'm promoting today. Ha ha ha. Anyway, so Greenland, it's not an independent country. Part of Denmark right now. Denmark spends a lot of money keeping Greenland part of Denmark. It also was almost bought by the Americans once, but it very much is not an independent nation yet. When it does go independent, that'll be a big thing. And also, this is one of those just like wacky, like, I don't think it's a good thing, but Greenland, if the world does warm severely, Greenland is one of those countries that severely benefits. Most of their country, unusable right now. If you look at the actual settled, if you look at the places where people actually live, there are very few places, and they're all along the coast, in the places that aren't always covered in snow. But when that goes down, the ice around Greenland is more usable, and also the land itself is going to be more and more useful. Because right now, very little goes on there. But, warm the globe up a few degrees, 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or whatever, Greenland starts to go up. So yeah, global warming is bad for a majority of people, or climate change. However, Greenland is there like, we're not going to say anything. I mean, they probably do say things. But it's worth mentioning just as a fun little fact, so we can throw it in there before we mention the next country that isn't really a country. I kind of like this map, actually. Let's continue going on this way. Because the next country I wanted to talk about is, actually, it's not like a pretend country. This is very much one of those independent countries. You don't think about it very often. However, the Northern Mariana Islands, because everyone knows Guam is part of the US, but what is very much an independent country, separate to that, is the Northern Mariana Islands, right? I mean, it's so true that if you look up their Wikipedia page, it very clearly says right here, like, oh yeah, they've got a flag, they've got their own, national anthem right here. Look how nice that is, right? Except no, they're not an independent country. I got you good. They're actually a part of the US. So the story behind why they're a part of the US is basically like, oh yeah, so when the US was in the region, they were doing some island hopping. They were, taking up the territories. They had to clear out a lot of Japanese forces who were stationed there. And the Mariana Islands, if you don't know, includes Guam. It's a bunch of islands all the way around here. So these are the Northern Mariana Islands, all of these ones right here. And this is the Southern Mariana Islands, or Guam. So Guam has a lot more people than all the other islands combined. And actually, the countries don't want unification. They don't want to make a combined territory. They like being separate, and yeah, it's really interesting that the Northern Mariana Islands has always kind of stayed separate. It's not even in the US customs territory, and the reason this happened is because, again, the US kind of took it over, and then the UN was like, hey, we're going to trust you to keep hold of them for a bit while we work out what to do with them, and then the US was like, hey, what if we didn't give them back? And everyone was like, well, I guess you're the US, what are we going to do about it? And so that's the story of the Northern Mariana Islands. The people actually do want to be a part of the US, though. It is a key thing to note there. The people do like being a part of the US. They voted for integration a few times. However, despite that fact, they're not part of any official US state. They don't have any voting congressman. They send a congressperson. He's not allowed to vote on anything. He goes there and says, hey, we're really far away. Can you send some money or something? Also they administer their own taxes and their own pensions, which is a big deal because the politics system is said to be mostly based on family connections because there's only 150,000 people. It's quite easy to go corrupt with such a small amount of jurisdiction. And yeah, the Northern Mariana Islands, their pension fund just went bust. And everyone's like, no pension money anymore. Fun fact with Toy Cat right here. So yeah, Northern Mariana Islands, you might think they're a country, and they might be a country, but they're also not because they're part of the US for a lot of different reasons, even if not all the reasons. And it raises the question of what even is a country even more. But rather than diving into that a little bit, let's dive into it all the way and talk about the EU, because looking at this map right here, you can't find the EU. If you type in EU into Google Maps, what you get is London, apparently. I found the EU, guys. It's right here in London. You get an immigration law clinic, apparently. That's nice. So yeah, this is the EU right here. This immigration law clinic in, I think this is near Tower Hamlets, right? Yeah, this is Tower Hamlets. This is actually the EU we've been looking for the whole time. But no, more seriously, also sometimes you'll end up with EU in France. It's a region that's just called which I think is interesting. Also, the other thing that comes up is the EU Basel airport thing. It's called the Europort, so that's the closest third thing. But you get my point. There isn't an EU on Google Maps. There isn't an EU on most maps, but yet the EU very much exists, or at least so the media will tell you. But no, the EU exists. I think we're all pretty... Can we all agree on that one, right? Like, set aside your differences about what you think about it. The EU does exist, yes? But what does it exist as? And that's where the question goes way off the rails. Because this is a map of the EU behind me. Like, I'm touching France right now. Oh, wait, I'm touching the ocean right now. I'm touching Portugal slightly inappropriately right now. But, like, am I touching the EU or am I touching Portugal? Portugal is a member of the EU. They use the euro. They're in the Schengen area. They're in the customs union. They're represented by the same figurehead, the president and the other man, Donald Tusk. Look, here's the G7 meeting, 7 nations of the 7 largest economies, and like hanging awkwardly to the side, you got again Donald Tusk and Jean-Claude Juncker, like the 2 EU guys. They're 2 knives of the G7. How is the G7 split into knives? That's the question you got to ask me. But yeah, there's this interesting thing where like, oh yeah, the EU is a thing, but it's also not a thing. And the simplest explanation is it's like, it has its own definition. It is a new thing that we're seeing more and more of in the 21st century. It is a multinational union. However, it does fit a lot of the criteria of a country. It does have a lot of the things you associate with a country, and it's in some cases, you can call the EU your country. If you look at your passport, I don't have my passport in me, one sec. If you look at your passport, I definitely didn't have to go and get this. You'll see how I probably travel too much, I guess. But if you look very faintly, European Union does come before your country's name. This is true for every country in the EU, even Croatia, which has blue passports, unlike every other nation in the bloc has this standard kind of ugly purple, right? Like, yeah, can we all agree? Like, regardless of what you think about passport colors, purple is like, I think the US blue ones are pretty cool. And so are the ones you get from the Middle East that are green. But I digress. Is the EU a country? Sort of. The EU fills this uncomfortable role where it kind of is a country, and going to the EU kind of is a thing, but also there are no fixed boundaries, there's no fixed definitions, and because of that, it can't really be, there's no real country area, there's lots of overlapping sort of countries, and yeah, that's why I think it's funny that, like, a lot of people think that the Brexit vote was, independence, like, outside of the UK, I should say, like, outside of Europe, and it's like, the UK was independent before joining the EU, the UK was independent inside the EU, and in 10 years, whatever happens, we will still be independent. But, like, what is independence? And the truth is, when it comes to countries, the definition of a country or a sovereign state really comes down to what definition you want to use. And some of those definitions include the EU. Some of them do not. Some definitions mean the EU is a country that has countries within it, like how the UK works. Some definitions say, no, it's a multinational union. And some definitions will say, no, they're the EU SSR. That's what people say, right? I think it's a bit silly, but it's the EU SSR, and therefore it is very much a country, and it's oppressing the peoples with because obviously it's like the USSR, and that it forced communism on all of its members, and that's what the EU does all the time. This is a little bit of sarcasm. I'm not sure what point I'm trying to raise here. Besides, what is the EU? It's hard to say, and that's part of why it's so easy to criticize and hard to criticize at the same time. It's really easy to defend and also hard to defend. Like, what does the EU do is a question that you'd kind of need to learn a lot about to answer, and that's a weird thing for something that is eventually, we don't know when, like 10 years, 50 years, 1,000 years, going to be a country. It is on the one thing that you can take away from this is regardless of where we are now, where we're in the future, will the word country mean anything in 100 years? Who knows for sure? But if it does, then the EU will probably be that by then. And yeah, we're on a pathway to that. We don't know how fast it's going. We don't know when we'll get there, or why, or where. But we do know that it's sort of a country and sort of not. But before we offend everyone by talking about the EU too much, let's talk about something that's way more exciting. Because people have been asking for so long, how do you travel so cheaply? Like, oh, you mentioned you're going to Macau, Toycat? Like, what are you doing going to Macau? Like, of all places, how are you getting there? Why are you getting there? Surely you must be a billionaire. And no, actually, I'm not a billionaire. It'd be nice if you have a billion and you want to give it to me. Please do. But yeah, I'm not even a million. I'm not even 100,000 I think if you count the house that I live in, I'm 100,000 but I'm not 100,000 So like, what's the deal? How do you travel so much? And isn't everyone 100,000 if you count the house they live in? That's a nice thought. You know, we're all point millionaires. But anyway, so to go back to my original point, because ADDing all over the place today, I want to just briefly mention that like the reason I can travel so much is because basically I'm super flexible. But people say like, what does that mean? Like, I'm flexible, but I've never seen 50-pound flights to Canada. I'm flexible, but I've never have to, you know, like I'm flying. I flew once to the Dominican, then flew back from the US. Like, how do you find cheap flight routings that are super weird and goofy? Like, why did you fly, you know, in and out from different airports in different countries? I once flew, you know, from, you know, Oslo to New Zealand and then back to Sweden, save money. I once flew from Switzerland to Switzerland, but via Canada, and then took some extra stops in Canada, saved money by seeing an extra city. How do all these things work? And the answers, you know, every single question has an answer, but all the questions that people want to ask are ones that I wasn't really too sure about. So I just started writing. I said I'd write a guide. People were excited for the guide for so long, and people still ask me about it. And now I've finished the guide. It's like 50 plus pages. And I decided, you know, the best thing to do with this is to just launch this on some ebook site. So you can actually put it in your Amazon Kindle, or if you want a thing, you can do that. So here it is. It is How to Travel Hack the World on a Budget, Kindle edition. It costs you $0, but no, I did put it on there, and I put it down for the minimum price possible. If you're curious, that's actually 99 cents, but if you put it for 99 cents, Amazon takes that money, so there's no real point to it. If you set it for $2.99, this is actually a way to support the channel, and you get like every single tip I've ever put in there, and I'll update it and put more tips as we learn more. So it's $2.99 if you're Amazon.com. It's £2.27. What an exciting price if you're on Amazon.co.uk. And yeah, I'd recommend you pre-order it because it's coming out in like 10 days. I set it up pre-order just so you can see that it's a thing there. And I intend to cover a lot of the tips that are in that book on this channel. It's just that I can't cover every single one all the time. Like, I like to cover tips as a fun fact, but no one wants to hear me talk about just travel advice and travel tips for 10 hours in a row. So that's why I haven't done it. However, if you do want to see that, then this book will be linked down below. Check it out, give it a pre-order, and I think you can rate it already, but like, you know, do a thing. It'd make me feel good about all of that time that I sunk into writing on planes and across the world stuff. Anyway, thank you very much for watching today's video. I hope you all enjoyed it. I hope you decide to check out the thing that I wrote and am selling for $2, because again, I wanted to just have a thing that's out there for super cheap, and maybe that's a thing you appreciate, and if it is, link down below. Either way though, thank you very much for watching this video, but as always, second channel, don't care, goodbye.